Why can't the chosen ones adapt to a regular job? It's not just about preferences or disliking work, but something much deeper, directly tied to each one's spiritual mission. Have you ever wondered why it feels so difficult to fit into what the world calls normal? Maybe you've tried everything, followed the rules, did what was expected of you, yet something still felt off. Deep inside, it's as if your soul is screaming, "This isn't for me." And you know what? You're not alone. That feeling of being out of place, of not belonging in a traditional job, is more common among the chosen ones than you think. So stay with us until the end, because today you'll understand why the chosen ones were never meant to work regular jobs. I'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Something inside you has never felt quite right. It's not just occasional doubt or dissatisfaction. It's deeper, more persistent, like a quiet voice whispering that you don't belong in this version of the world. You've followed the path they laid out for you. You've worked hard, checked all the right boxes. Yet, no matter how much you try, you can't shake the feeling that this isn't where you're meant to be. You look around and see people who move through life effortlessly, who seem content with routine, with expectations, with the idea of just getting by. But for you, every day feels like a struggle, like you're wearing a mask that doesn't quite fit. And the more you try to suppress it, the louder that inner knowing becomes. It gnaws at you in moments of stillness, whispers to you in the silence, reminding you that something is missing, something bigger than anything you've been told to expect from life. At first, you convince yourself it's just stress, just the normal weight of responsibility. Maybe you need a new job, a new hobby, a vacation, something to distract you. But deep down, you already know the truth. This isn't just restlessness. It's not boredom. It's not a phase. It's a calling. And the longer you ignore it, the more unbearable it becomes. Think about it. How many times have you sat at your desk, staring at the clock, feeling the weight of time slipping through your fingers? How many times have you told yourself, "I just need to push through," only to wake up the next day feeling just as lost? You followed the script they gave you, yet something inside you refuses to settle. Why? Because that script was never written for people like you. This world wasn't built for those who question, for those who feel too deeply, for those who crave something beyond the ordinary. Society rewards compliance, not curiosity. It tells you to fall in line, to play your role, to silence that inner voice. And for most people, that's enough. But not for you. You've always felt like an outsider, like you were watching life through a window instead of actually living it. And no matter how hard you try to conform, you can't escape the feeling that you were meant for something more. But here's the part they don't tell you. This feeling you have? It's not a flaw. It's not a mistake. It's a sign, a message, a signal from something greater than yourself, trying to wake you up. You weren't meant to fit into this world because you were born to change it. You weren't meant to follow the path they set for you because your path was never meant to be ordinary. Maybe you've tried to silence it before. Maybe you've convinced yourself that if you just push harder, if you just ignore that nagging voice, it will eventually fade away. But has it? Or has it only grown louder? Has it turned into exhaustion, into frustration, into the quiet pain of feeling trapped in a life that doesn't feel like yours? You weren't meant to feel this lost. You weren't meant to wake up every day dreading the hours ahead. And yet, here you are. But why? Because everything you were told about success, about happiness, about how life should be, wasn't designed for people like you. The system was built for predictability, for control, for efficiency. Not for visionaries, not for people who see the world differently, not for those who were meant to create rather than conform. And if you think back, you've felt this for as long as you can remember. As a child, you questioned things others accepted without hesitation. You saw through illusions, felt truths that couldn't be explained. But over time, the world convinced you that fitting in was more important than feeling free. That following the path was safer than carving your own. So you tried. You played along. You did what was expected. But no matter how much you tried to blend in, that feeling never left. That quiet whisper telling you, "This isn't it." So now, the real question isn't, "Why do I feel this way?" It's, "What is this feeling trying to tell me?" Because what if, just for a moment, you stop fighting it? What if, instead of seeing it as something to fix, you saw it as something to follow? Because if you've felt this way your whole life, don't you think there's a reason? What if you were never meant to fit in because you were always meant to break free? And more importantly, what if this feeling isn't something to be ignored, but a truth that was never supposed to be uncovered? Before continuing with our spiritual evolution, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel. Thank you. You felt it your entire life, that invisible force pulling you in a direction you can't quite name. A restlessness, an unshakable knowing that you weren't meant for the life laid out in front of you. And yet, no matter how much you try to suppress it, it lingers. Society tells you it's just in your head, that everyone feels lost sometimes, that you need to stop overthinking and just accept life as it is. But deep down, you know that's a lie. Because not everyone feels this way. Not everyone questions the world around them. Not everyone has that burning feeling inside, screaming that they were meant for something more. Most people don't stop to think about why things are the way they are. They wake up, go to work, follow the rules, and never question if the path they're on was designed to keep them small. They've been conditioned to believe that success means stability, that happiness means obedience, that purpose means fitting into a mold someone else created. But you've never been able to do that. You've tried, God knows you've tried, but no matter how much you push yourself to conform, something inside you refuses. It fights back. It refuses to settle. And maybe, just maybe, that's because you were never meant to. What if the reason you've struggled to fit in isn't because there's something wrong with you, but because the system was never built for people like you? The discomfort you feel, the frustration, the sense that you're suffocating in a life that isn't yours, these aren't random emotions. They're signals, warnings, clues that something bigger is at play. But the world doesn't want you to see it, because once you do, everything changes. Think about it. Why does society push so hard for you to fit into a traditional job, to accept a life that drains you, to settle for less than what your soul craves? Why does it make you feel like you're the problem for wanting more? It's because the moment you realize that you were never meant to be part of the system, you become dangerous. People like you, people who think, who question, who refuse to accept a life that doesn't fulfill them, threaten the very foundation of what keeps this world running. They don't want you to know that you were designed for more. They don't want you to understand that your energy, your creativity, your ability to see beyond the illusion, these are your greatest strengths, not your weaknesses. They want you to believe that struggling to fit in means you're broken. But what if it means you're awake? What if every moment of doubt, every sleepless night, every aching feeling of being out of place was never a curse, but a calling? Maybe you felt it growing stronger lately. The discomfort that used to come and go is now impossible to ignore. You wake up feeling like you're carrying a weight that no one else seems to notice. You move through your days feeling like you're waiting for something, some sign, some moment that tells you where you're supposed to go. And the longer you wait, the more unbearable it becomes. But have you ever stopped to wonder why? Because this feeling isn't going away. It never will. Not until you listen to it. Not until you stop running from it and start running toward it. Because here's the truth they never wanted you to figure out. You weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to rise, to break free, to step into something far greater than the life they try to give you. And the only question that remains is, are you finally ready to stop ignoring what's been calling you all along? But before you answer, think about this. How many times have you ignored yourself before? How many times have you convinced yourself to be realistic, to stop dreaming, to accept the life that was handed to you? And what has it brought you? Comfort? Or the slow, creeping realization that every single time you chose to fit in, a part of you disappeared? That every time you silenced yourself, you felt a little emptier? You know what's happening to you. You feel it. You feel the weight of every moment you spent denying your own soul, every time you forced yourself to be something you're not. And if you keep ignoring it, what do you think happens next? Because here's the truth, there comes a point where the voice inside you stops screaming. Not because you finally found peace, but because you've drowned it out completely. And when that happens, you become just like them. Another person who used to dream. Another person who used to believe they were meant for more. Another person who let the world tell them who they were supposed to be. And once that happens, there's no turning back. So now tell me, how much longer are you going to pretend you don't hear it? How much longer are you going to act like this feeling isn't real? Because the choice isn't between fitting in or standing out anymore. The choice is between living or fading away completely. Have you ever wondered why the idea of a normal life has never felt right to you? Why you've spent years trying to convince yourself that you should just settle like everyone else, yet something inside you refuses? That resistance isn't a coincidence. That internal war you've been fighting, it's not because you're lost or broken or unable to adapt. It's because deep down you already know the truth. You were sent here for something greater. But here's the problem. Nobody ever tells you what that something is. They tell you to go to school, get a job, build a life that looks good on paper. But what they don't tell you is that some people like you, weren't made for the life they preach. You weren't meant to follow a path that was designed to keep you small. And the proof? It's in everything you've been feeling. Because every time you've tried to force yourself into their version of life, your soul has resisted. Every time you've tried to ignore that deeper pull inside you, you've felt yourself become more drained, more disconnected, more lost. But lost from what exactly? That's the question, isn't it? Because you didn't always feel this way. There was a time when you didn't doubt yourself, when you didn't feel trapped in a cycle that makes no sense. You were born with something inside you, something that set you apart before the world even had a chance to tell you who you were supposed to be. But the moment you entered this world, they started trying to strip it away. Think about it. From the time you were a child, you were taught to stop listening to yourself, to silence your curiosity, to follow the rules, to put your dreams aside for things that were more practical. They told you to focus on survival, not on meaning, on security, not on purpose. And little by little, the real you, the part of you that knew you were here for more, was buried under layers of conditioning, expectation, and fear. But here's the truth: your purpose never disappeared. It never left you. It's been there all along, waiting for you to remember it. That's why no matter how much you try to conform, no matter how much you tell yourself that you should just accept reality, something inside you fights back. That feeling isn't a burden. It's not a mistake. It's your mission trying to break through everything you were taught to believe. And maybe you've started to notice the signs, the synchronicities, the unexplainable moments that feel like messages meant just for you. Maybe you've had dreams that feel more like memories. Maybe you've met people who seem to enter your life at just the right time, guiding you, pushing you towards something you can't quite define yet. Maybe, just maybe, everything that's happened in your life up until this moment has been leading you here, to the realization that the path you were meant to walk has been calling you all along. Because the truth is, you don't find your mission. You remember it. And the first step? It's understanding that everything you've been through, all the pain, all the confusion, all the moments where you felt like you didn't belong, was never random. It was part of your preparation. You had to experience this discomfort because you were never meant to live on the surface of life. You were meant to go deeper, to see beyond what most people see. That's why ordinary things don't satisfy you. That's why the traditional path has felt so unbearable. Because your soul wasn't built for that. You weren't meant to just exist. You were meant to awaken. But awakening isn't easy. It requires you to shed everything that isn't true. It requires you to let go of the version of yourself that was created to fit into a world that was never meant for you. It requires you to confront your fears, to step outside of your comfort zone, to embrace the unknown even when it terrifies you. Because that's the only way you'll ever find what you're looking for. And if you don't, if you keep ignoring it, if you keep telling yourself that maybe one day this feeling will go away, it won't. It will only get louder. Because when you were sent here, you weren't sent here to be just another person following the crowd. You were sent here to lead, to create, to transform. And the longer you deny that, the more lost you'll feel, the more exhausted, the more disconnected from yourself. Because the cost of ignoring your calling isn't just unhappiness. It's losing yourself completely. So now you have to make a choice. You can keep pretending that this feeling doesn't mean anything. You can keep pushing it down, trying to force yourself into a life that was never meant for you. Or you can finally listen. Finally trust that the reason you've always felt different isn't because something is wrong with you, but because something powerful is waiting for you. And the only thing standing between you and that life is whether or not you're willing to step into it. But there's something no one ever told you. There's a price for ignoring this calling. And the question now isn't just whether you're ready to accept it, but whether you can afford to keep ignoring it. Because maybe at some point you'll become just like everyone else, just another person who let their fire burn out. You feel it, don't you? That quiet exhaustion that never seems to go away. It's not just physical tiredness, it's something deeper. A weariness that lingers even after you rest. A weight on your soul that no amount of distraction, no job, no relationship, no temporary success ever seems to lift. Because this exhaustion isn't coming from overwork or stress or lack of sleep. It's coming from resistance, from fighting against something that was never meant to be fought, from forcing yourself into a life that isn't yours. Maybe you've convinced yourself that this feeling is normal, that everyone feels like this at some point, that it's just part of life, part of being an adult, part of being responsible. But what if it's not? What if the exhaustion you feel isn't just an inconvenience, but a message? A warning, a sign that every day you ignore your real path, you're losing something you can't afford to lose, yourself? Because that's the price, isn't it? The price of pretending. The price of choosing comfort over truth. The price of staying in a life that doesn't feel like yours simply because you're afraid of what will happen if you walk away. And in the beginning, it's subtle. You start by telling yourself that you just need to push through, that you need to be grateful for what you have, that maybe if you just try a little harder, you'll eventually feel at peace. But no matter what you do, the feeling doesn't go away. It lingers. It drains you. And little by little, you start losing touch with the fire that once burned inside you. You stop dreaming the way you used to. You stop questioning things. You stop feeling excited about the future. And one day, without even realizing it, you wake up and realize that the person you used to be, the person who once believed in something greater, is gone. That's the real danger. Not failure, not rejection, not uncertainty, but the slow, quiet death of everything that made you you. The fading of the dreams you once had. The silence of the voice inside you that once spoke so loudly. And if you think this won't happen to you, ask yourself this. How many times have you already silenced that voice? How many times have you felt the pull towards something greater and ignored it because it didn't make sense? How many times have you told yourself, maybe later, without realizing that later never comes? Because that's how it happens. Not all at once, but little by little, choice by choice, until one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself anymore. But here's what no one tells you. Ignoring your calling doesn't just make you lose yourself. It starts to take from you in ways you never expected. It takes your energy, your passion, your ability to feel truly alive. It makes everything feel heavier, harder, emptier. The wrong path doesn't just slow you down. It deteriorates you. It wears you down until you no longer have the strength to reach for something more. Maybe you've already felt it. The moments where no matter how much you try to rest, you still feel drained. The way your passion has started to fade. The way the things that used to bring you joy no longer feel the same. It's because you're not just physically exhausted, you're spiritually exhausted. You're carrying the weight of a life that was never meant for you, and every day you stay on this path, that weight gets heavier. And the truth is, if you keep going like this, you won't just feel stuck, you'll become stuck. Because the longer you stay in a place that isn't right for you, the harder it becomes to leave. The more you convince yourself that maybe this is just how life is, that maybe happiness was never meant for you, that maybe the fire inside you was never real to begin with. And that's the real loss, not the missed opportunities, not the risks you were too afraid to take, but the loss of belief, the belief that you were meant for more. So what happens if you keep ignoring it? What happens if you keep pretending that this feeling doesn't mean anything? If you keep waiting for the right time to finally choose yourself? You already know the answer. Because every time you've ignored it before, the feeling hasn't disappeared, it's only grown stronger. And if you ignore it for long enough, one of two things will happen. Either life will force you to change through crisis, through loss, through something that shakes you so deeply that you have no choice but to wake up, or you'll lose the ability to hear the calling at all. And that's the worst fate of all. Because once the voice inside you goes silent, once you convince yourself that the life you're living is enough, even when it's killing you from the inside out, that's when you truly become lost. Not because you don't know where to go, but because you no longer believe you were meant to go anywhere at all. But it doesn't have to get to that point. Because right now, in this moment, you still have a choice. You can keep doing what you've always done, keep ignoring it, keep convincing yourself that you have time, that one day things will magically change on their own. Or you can decide that you're done waiting, that you're done losing pieces of yourself to a life that was never meant to hold you, that you're ready to step into the unknown, not because it's easy, not because it's comfortable, but because the cost of staying where you are is simply too high. And the truth is, deep down, you already know the answer. Because the person you used to be, the person who once dreamed, who once believed in something greater, is still in there, waiting for you to finally listen, waiting for you to finally stop running from yourself. And the only question that remains is, how much more of yourself are you willing to lose before you finally wake up? There comes a point where staying the same is more painful than changing. A moment when the weight of everything you've been avoiding becomes unbearable. You've felt it, how each day that passes without stepping into your truth feels like another piece of you slipping away. You tell yourself you'll figure it out later, that you need more time, more security, more certainty. But time keeps moving, and with each day you hesitate, the gap between who you are and who you were meant to be grows wider. At some point, you have to ask yourself, how much longer are you willing to live like this? How much more of yourself are you willing to sacrifice in the name of comfort, of routine, of fear? Because if you've felt this calling for years and it hasn't disappeared, if no amount of distractions or excuses have made it go away, then isn't it time to admit that this isn't just a phase? That this isn't just some fleeting idea but something real? But here's what stops most people: the uncertainty of what comes next. Because breaking free from a life that was never meant for you isn't just about leaving behind what no longer serves you. It's about stepping into something unknown, something terrifying. And that's where most people turn back. Because when you've spent your whole life being told that success looks a certain way, that happiness follows a specific path, that safety comes from stability, then the idea of walking away from all of that feels like stepping off the edge of a cliff. What if you fail? What if you make the wrong choice? What if everything falls apart? The questions never stop, and they never will. Because your mind has been trained to fear the unknown, to stay where it's comfortable, to seek out familiarity, even if that familiarity is slowly killing you. But here's the truth: your soul doesn't care about comfort. It cares about purpose. And every time you ignore that purpose, you feel the consequences. The exhaustion, the emptiness, the quiet frustration of a life that doesn't fit. And maybe, until now, you thought you had more time, that you could put this off until later. But think about how many times you've already said that. Think about how many years have passed since you first felt this pull. And then ask yourself, if not now, when? Because this feeling isn't going to disappear. If anything, it's only going to get louder, more unbearable, more relentless, until you either listen to it or you lose the ability to hear it at all. And here's what they don't tell you about waiting: opportunities don't last forever. There are moments in life when doors open, when the universe aligns in a way that allows you to step into something greater. But if you hesitate for too long, those doors close. The energy shifts. The window of possibility disappears. And what happens when that moment passes? You go back to sleep. You convince yourself that it was never real, that it was all in your head, that you were foolish for even thinking you were meant for something more. And just like that, another dream dies. Another soul fades into the background. Another person who could have changed the world settles for a life that never felt like theirs to begin with. And I know what you're thinking. But what am I supposed to do? You want an answer, a step-by-step plan. You want certainty before you move. But that's not how this works. That's not how it's ever worked. Because the first step isn't about knowing exactly where you're going. It's about deciding that where you are is no longer where you're supposed to be. It's about choosing yourself, even when you have no idea what comes next. It's about understanding that purpose isn't something you figure out before you begin. It's something that reveals itself as you go. So the real question isn't, what's my purpose? It's, am I willing to move forward without knowing exactly where it leads? Because the people who change their lives, the ones who step into their true path, the ones who finally wake up, they aren't the ones who had all the answers before they started. They're the ones who started without the answers. Who took the leap before they were ready? Who felt the fear and did it anyway? Because readiness is an illusion. You will never feel ready. You will never reach a point where everything makes perfect sense, where you have zero doubts, where you're guaranteed success. That's not how purpose works. Purpose asks you to trust, to walk forward even when you can't see the whole path, to surrender to something bigger than yourself, knowing that the only way to truly fail is to never begin at all. So here's what you need to understand. The moment you say yes to yourself, things begin to shift. Doors start opening. Opportunities you never could have imagined begin appearing. But none of that happens if you keep waiting. If you keep telling yourself that one day, someday, you'll be ready. Because the truth is, you don't need more time. You need to decide. And maybe you think you're not strong enough, that you're not capable, that people like you don't get to have extraordinary lives. But look at everything you've already been through. Look at how many times life has knocked you down and you've gotten back up. Look at the battles you've fought, the things you've survived, the pain you've endured. You are already stronger than you think. And the only thing standing between you and the life you were meant for is whether or not you're finally ready to see that. Because at the end of the day, no one is coming to save you. No one is going to give you permission. No one is going to walk this path for you. You either decide to step into your calling or you don't. You either listen to the voice inside you or you let it fade. And if you don't choose yourself now, when will you? There's a moment in life when you realize there's no turning back. When you finally understand that the person you were before no longer fits into the life you once lived. You've felt it, haven't you? That shift inside you. That quiet but undeniable realization that nothing will ever be the same. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you now know. And the truth is, even if you try to go back to fit yourself into the spaces that once held you, it wouldn't work, because you've outgrown them. And once you've outgrown something, forcing yourself to stay will only suffocate you. So now, you stand at a crossroads. On one side, the familiar, the predictable, the life you've known, the one that has kept you small but safe. On the other side, the unknown, the path that was always meant for you, but that requires something most people are too afraid to give: faith. Not in something external, not in some outside force that will magically make everything easy, but faith in yourself. Faith that you were built for this, that the voice inside you hasn't been lying, that every step you take toward the life you were meant for will be met with exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. And this is where most people hesitate. They stand here right where you are now, looking at the life they know they were meant for, and they freeze. Not because they don't want it, but because they believe they're not ready. Because they think they need more time, more experience, more proof. But proof doesn't come before the leap. It comes because of it. And the only way to know what's waiting for you on the other side is to step into it fully, without hesitation, without waiting for permission, without needing every single answer before you begin. And maybe that terrifies you. Maybe the idea of stepping into the unknown feels too overwhelming, too risky, too impossible. But let me ask you this: wasn't it terrifying to stay where you were? Wasn't it painful to wake up every day and pretend you didn't feel what you felt? Wasn't it exhausting to force yourself into a life that never truly fit? Because that's the real risk. Not the uncertainty of the unknown, but the certainty of staying in a life that drains you, of choosing to ignore your own potential, of waking up 10 years from now, looking in the mirror, and realizing you became someone you don't even recognize. Because here's the truth: most people don't wake up one day and decide to change. They wake up one day and realize that the opportunity to change has passed them by, that the fire they once had is gone, that the voice that used to call them towards something greater has gone silent. Not because it was never real, but because they waited too long, because they told themselves tomorrow one too many times. And before they knew it, tomorrow became never. But you're here now. You haven't lost it yet. You haven't let it fade completely. You still feel the pull. You still hear the voice inside you whispering that there's more. And if you still hear it, if you still feel it, then that means it's not too late. That means you still have a choice. That means your story isn't over. But if you keep waiting, if you keep convincing yourself that you need more time, eventually you will run out of time. And the question is, what will you do before that happens? Because this is the moment. Right now. Not next week. Not next year. Not when you feel ready, because you never will. The fear will never fully go away. The doubts will never disappear completely. But the difference between those who step into their calling and those who don't isn't that they had no fear. It's that they didn't let the fear stop them. It's that they chose to listen to the voice inside them instead of the voices outside them telling them to play it safe. And yes, the path ahead won't be easy. There will be moments of doubt. There will be obstacles. There will be days when you question everything. But the difference now is that you know. You know that the resistance isn't a sign to turn back. It's proof that you're on the right path. You know that every time fear tries to pull you back, it's because you're about to break through something big. You know that the life you've always wanted isn't found in waiting, it's found in doing. So what now? You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to know every step. All you need is one thing: to decide that you're done hesitating, that you're done letting fear dictate your future, that you're done waiting for someone to give you permission to step into the life you were always meant for. Because no one is going to do it for you. No one is coming to save you. This is your path, your purpose, your destiny, and the only person who can claim it is you. So, the real question isn't, what if I fail? It's, what if I never try? What if the life you've always dreamed of is waiting for you, but you never step forward to claim it? What if everything you've ever wanted was possible, but you let fear convince you it wasn't? What if the greatest regret of your life isn't the risks you took, but the ones you were too afraid to take? Because at the end of the day, you will look back on this moment. You will remember standing at this crossroads. And the only thing you'll have left is the choice you made. So what's it going to be? Are you going to stay in a life that was never meant for you? Or are you finally going to step into the one that was? If this video has changed your spiritual journey and helped you connect with your universal strength, subscribe to the channel, leave a like below, and activate the notification bell so we can notify you when new content arrives. We also suggest watching the video indicated on the screen so you can continue your journey of spiritual growth and inner evolution of knowledge. Thank you for staying with us until the end, and see you in the next video.